So the question is, if I'm writing for the reader, what reader am I writing for? How do I envision my reader? Well, to be honest, when I did a book tour in the U.S., the audience looked just like this. Most of my readers are women. Most of them are in their 40s and 50s. I'm seeing women come out in their 30s and 20s is always a surprise. I now know I have readers as young as 10, 11, and 12. There's even precocious kids who've read Wool, which I think is more adult than my other works like Mollified. So my audience is my age or older, and you know, when I'm writing, and this is true of the very first novel, the Mollified book, I was writing for my wife, who I knew was going to be the only person I could force to read this. Yeah, I mean, I was going to guilt her into it, and I would do dishes for a year if she would just give it a chance. She actually came home the first day. I was supposed to be writing book reviews for a website called Crime Critics, and instead came home from a conference that I went to for Crime Critics and wrote. I had this monster day where I wrote like 5,000 or 6,000 words and had several chapters. And she came home and I'm like, honey, I'm like writing a book. And she's like, again? You know, she knew it wasn't going to go anywhere. And she read it, and I'm of course watching her, you know, making sure she laughs at the right places. And so how do you like it after every paragraph? Just driving her nuts. But at the end of it, she was like, so what happens next? Like, I got to know what happens next. And I was like, oh God, I don't know what happens next. So the next day, I just, you know, every day I was writing for her, and she would read what I wrote. She could read in 10 minutes what I spent 10 hours writing, and which is something that still frustrates me today. I'll work for 3 months on a novel, publish it, and by noon, someone's read it and written a review, and I'm like, because they stayed up till 3 in the morning, didn't refresh until it went live. And when's the next one coming out? I'm just waking up from having published a thing. So that's who I primarily write for, and it's she has a wide taste, so she wants me to write a fairy book next, like something about fairies. She keeps bugging me about that. So the question is, how much of the Wool did you have mapped out, and maybe in general my writing, how much do you map out ahead of time and plot ahead of time? There are pantsers and there are plotters. When I wrote Mollified, I was writing a little as both. It's a story where each little individual adventure kind of wraps up in a section, and that was about as far as I could plot out, and I was pantsing it from section to section. That makes sense. Like I writing by the seat of my pants. Yeah, it's just for alliteration, pantsing and plotting. So if making things up started with a P, we would just use that word. So I could map out this little arc, but I didn't know when I finished that what was going to happen next. And when I wrote Wool, the very first story, which this little one, this was the whole thing. So I didn't map out anything after that. When people said, oh, we want more, that's when I started Wool 2, and I knew where Wool 5 would end. I didn't know if it'd be 5 books, but I knew where the plot arc would end. Yeah. Yeah. I even wrote the last chapter of Dust, which is the 3rd book in the series. I wrote that while I was writing, I think, Wool 3, and I knew this is where I want this whole story to go. And you don't know how many pages it'll tell, but I actually wrote that scene, and I wrote the last scene in Wool when I was writing Wool 2 or 3 as well. I've met authors who write the last chapter before they begin the book. It's helpful for me not to meander and feel lost and not know what my destination is. And so by writing a scene that I know takes place later, might be in the middle of the book, now it's a bridge. Okay, that's a handhold. And I can just get myself to that point. And then, oh my God, look at all that in between stuff that I now have written. So it helps me to have these stepping stones and having the very last one in sight. And, you know, my story's not going to become about this. My story is about this. You know, all my stories have a theme, and I could bore a college classroom to tears with all my metaphors and symbolism and the stuff that entertains me, and I don't care if anyone finds any of it. That's the reason that I write, to put that meaning into the story. Well, so the question is about that I seem to be a social writer, and other writers kind of closet themselves and produce the material and come out like whole cloth. And is that a generational thing? It might be generational, but maybe not like you think it is, because if we go back, books are new inventions. Stories are much older than books. And the way stories used to come about was through trial and error with telling stories to audiences. And it was never the same story twice. And you get to gauge the audience's reaction. What worked, what didn't. Oh, they really like the Cyclops. I need to make sure we always tell the Cyclops part of the story. And this is how the Iliad and the Odyssey were written. We think of them as classic books. They're not. They're campfire stories. that to me is the heart of what it is to be human. It's why we gossip. It's why we're on Facebook too much. We want to clue each other in, and we want to embellish and exaggerate and entertain. And I think a book should not be static. The joy of writing the Wool series and writing it serialized was that I was playing for a live audience. And I was getting emails while I'm writing Wool 3 about what happened in Wool 2. Oh, you think that's going to happen? Well, I'll reinforce that expectation, and then I'll dash it. Oh, you love this character? What's the worst possible way I can kill them? It's not always about feeding into the expectations. It's about understanding what they're enjoying. Oh, they really like a soft romance tied in. I didn't know that was going to be the best part. I rely on my wife telling me. Most editors highlight the stuff you need to fix. My wife highlights the stuff that I'm not allowed to change. She'll highlight an entire sentence, and in the comments section of the Word document, she'll say, you cannot delete this, you cannot change this. Because she's seen it before where she gets the final work, and she's like, what happened to that one part? That was my favorite part. I'm like, oh, someone else didn't like it. Well, I liked it, and okay, now I have to tell you, everything I like, don't change that. And, bands go into a recording studio, and they record an entire album, and they don't know what song is going to be a hit. They try to guess, and they try to release singles, and it's the third single that comes out that makes that album. And I would guess that most bands would really prefer what happens on stage when they can play and they know like where the roars come and when the lighters are held aloft. That for me is the enjoyable part of writing. And now we've got fan fiction, which we've kind of Wool was kind of one of the first works to have people writing fan fiction and charging money for it, because I control the rights and I can do what a publisher would never do. And I can say, charge money for it, keep every penny that you make. I'm just flattered you would want to explore this world. And it keeps readers off my back while I'm writing the next story. When they bug me like, when's the next book coming out?
Do you think that's what started the latest thing on Amazon?
Kindle Worlds? No, they were working on that before. But it was very close to the same time that this was happening that they're like, oh, by the way, we might be, we're going to keep you in mind since you're very open.
Can I add one thing? That
Sure.
You mentioned the Iliad and the Odyssey. I was absolutely fascinated. You might have read it in the New Yorker magazine. Maybe 4 years ago, they had an article that was about these storytellers in India, the southernmost part of India. These were traditional. They learned through the family. They were men who did not know how to read. And they would come into a village, and they would do it as entertainment. They would read from the Sanskrit stories of these battles. They would do it all from memory. They would start at sunset, and they would keep going until sunrise. As soon as somebody intervened and taught one of these men how to read, we could no longer do it by memory.
It's amazing. Well, bringing up questions of memory and how technology, because the book is technology changes us. I see that with computers now where, we don't need to know the answers for anything. We just need a reliable wireless signal in Google, and we know it all, or we know how we search. I'm also going to pass around. This is, I dropped out of the College of Charleston, and I've gone back twice to try to finish, and life has intervened both times. And I don't know if they normally put dropouts on the cover of their, but I thought I'd pass this around. Well, I meant to do that earlier.
Two more facts quickly. Can I give you two?
Yeah, I have some people back here too.